Hi, everybody. Welcome and good morning. My name is Juan Salazar. I lead the content team here at Sharpist. And today, I won't be speaking on my own, thankfully. I am joined by two dear colleagues and two excellent speakers, if I may add. First, we have Huram Massud, who is our Chief Product Officer here at Sharpist. Would you like to introduce yourself quickly, Huram?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining, and thank you, Juan, for that introduction. As Juan mentioned, I'm the Chief Product Officer at Sharpist. I have a passion for building products that help people with lifelong learning. And I have a passion for building products that actually can concretely help people measure their progress and also help companies develop people towards care outcomes. As far as my background goes, I was an engineer briefly, but spent a lot of time in management consulting. I worked at McKinsey advising large companies on topics of leadership development across emerging markets and Europe. And then following that, I also started a university called African Leadership University in across sub-Saharan Africa in 4 different countries, where we help develop leaders for the future of the African continent. Really excited to share thoughts with you today. I would really appreciate if we could keep it interactive. It's a small enough group. If you have questions or if you think that you want to challenge any perspective that Karola and I bring or Juan brings, please mention it in the chat and we can get into a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your introduction, Huram, and also for letting people know or reminding them that the chat is open. Please feel free to share input or questions in there. We will take them as they come. And finally, we also have with us Karola Tunik. Hope I pronounced it correctly. She is a senior customer success specialist at Sharpist. Please let everybody know who you are, Karola.
Good morning, and thank you, Juan. Yes, was perfect, my name. So yes, I'm senior customer success specialist at Sharpist, which means that I am working closely with the customers of Sharpist and making sure that their coaching goals are being met, that we have a project properly set up and everybody is very happy in their coaching. I also am very interested in change management and strategies, and so I really like working with the customers on goals and on strategies to really get to their company goals.
Thank you, Karola. So I think it's evident that we have a nice roster of participants here today, and we will be talking about connecting leadership coaching to company outcomes. And we're going to do this by focusing on goals, because goals are a fundamental element of coaching, and that's what we do. So we were going to talk about how goals are set, how goals are tracked, and how they are leveraged for organizational success. So we have a very concise agenda for today. First, I will introduce you to a goals-driven approach that we've developed over the years in order to ensure that we can provide successful leadership development for companies. After I'm done with that, Huram and Karola are going to have a conversation about focus areas. Focus areas are a framework that we developed at Sharpist, and this framework connects individual coaching goals with company outcomes. Finally, we will have around 10 minutes to open the floor for any questions and discussion. And please, as we've said before, if you have any questions or input that you would like to share at any point, write it in the chat. Both me and Shoshana, who's also with us, will be monitoring the conversation, taking any relevant questions as they arise. And we will try to leave longer ones or the ones that require a little bit more discussion, a little bit more depth for the final Q&A time. So with that being said, let's start. And let's start at the very beginning and briefly talk about learning. I think we've all realized that learning does not happen overnight. If that was the case, many university exams and papers would have had a different outcome. That's not the case. Learning is an ongoing process or a journey, if you will. Especially for companies, successful learning requires a strategic approach to continuously developing groups of learners or leaders over time. And that is exactly what Sharpist does. At Sharpist, we create leadership development programs for enterprises worldwide. And we have a broader mission to help millions of professionals lead healthier, more productive, and more fulfilling lives and careers. And from this experience, working with hundreds of enterprises through the years, we have learned that there are very common objectives that companies want to tackle through people development. Usually companies want to develop their own talent in their organization in order to drive greater business outcomes. Companies also want to reduce employee turnover by keeping employees happy, cared for, and motivated. And they also like to build resilience to changing needs like new work in a never-changing reality. However, the current market or the state of the market makes it really challenging to implement solutions that drive or ensure learner engagement. It also makes it difficult to find a cost-effective people development solution that can be scaled easily across an organization. And also, it's kind of difficult to implement a solution that diagnoses or that helps you diagnose current key organizational issues and how to tackle them effectively. So in this process of understanding our clients' needs and their challenges and how we're able to meet them, we came to the realization that there are three key pillars for leadership development to be actually successful. The first one is personalization. An ideal people development solution gives individuals the opportunity to tackle their exact challenges in a customized way. At least at Sharpist, we make learning programs really personalized with one-on-one leadership coaching and bespoke micro-learning content for every learner on demand. The second key to making leadership development effective is scalability. HR has to be able to kickstart a customized, scalable, and effective solution quickly and across the entire organization. So not just targeting a specific group, but targeting groups that evolve over time. And we enable our customers to do this by creating kind of learning communities, if you will, by onboarding continuously different learner cohorts extensively with an ongoing process that entails different measures. And finally, the third key to effective leadership development is measurability. So in an ideal program, learning focus and learning progress is tracked and reported in a way that generates insights into the learning program success and generates insights into the organizational status quo and where to move forward. So in order to do this, we developed a framework that enables learners to identify and understand key behaviors that they want to work on or develop, and we also empower them to pursue them in a very effective way. So what I'm showing you now is the evolution of a leadership development journey. This visualization represents different levels on which coaching topics and coaching themes progress. Typically, a coaching journey will start by deepening your understanding of yourself, then following up with expanding your knowledge on how to lead, then on how to work with others, and finally on how you can deliver results through systems. However, it really bears mentioning that there is not a single prescribed formula for a coaching journey. It always starts from individual desires, individual needs, and especially individual context as well. So as you can see, this process, whichever way it goes, it's quite an extensive process to advance through these different stages. So the question arises, how can we make sure that this process is manageable on one hand and also effective on the other hand? Manageable for the learner and effective for HR. And the answer is by making it a goals-driven process. So setting goals is not only essential in life as a whole, it is also a key component of many approaches to coaching. If you're not familiar, I can really recommend that you research the Pyramid of Goals. It was developed by John Whitmore. And in this concept, he explores 4 major types of goals and how they're linked. And this concept is the entire foundation of his very well-known and very broadly adopted GROW coaching model. Back to goals. Why do we focus on goals? So the first reason why we focus on goals is because they foster self-awareness. Goals help learners reflect on the tangible outcomes of an otherwise long and at times extensive development journey. So we only truly learn if we actively engage with the knowledge or with the skills that we want to develop or that we want to improve. And through continuous goal setting, we invite learners to reflect on their mid or long-term development goals, and then to distill those into very specific desired outcomes. And we do all of this in order to make coaching deliberate, intentional, and to turn all of these learnings into a cohesive story. So that's the first reason, fostering self-awareness. The second reason why we focus on goals is because they enhance learning. We've established that coaching is a learning process and that it focuses on behavioral change. A process of behavioral change can be shorter for some people, and for other people, it can be lifelong. The point is that it does not happen overnight, like learning. So the most effective way to support this process is to break it down into smaller components. In the case of leadership coaching, which is what we're talking about, it's leadership competencies or key behaviors. And these need to be progressively worked on as the coachee's life and career dynamics dictate. So it's a dynamic process, it's not static. And finally, the third reason why we focus on goals is because they can become drivers. So I mentioned active engagement with knowledge or with a skill that you want to acquire as a key factor for learning success. The other key factor is a simple one, and that is motivation. In the middle of a very long-term development journey with open-ended, dynamic, ever-changing goals, it's very easy to lose sight of what you still have ahead of you, but most importantly, how far you've come. So the way in which you've developed already. So through fostering the habit of setting and tracking goals constantly, we can, on one hand, transparently report learning progress to every single learner, and also provide very necessary, immediate, reinforcing feedback when goals are achieved. So the words tracking and reporting are two key words here. These are words that I use every day of my professional life, and I'm sure that you do too. These are key words because they link this goal-driven approach to learning that I've just explained to the outcome-driven people development strategies that companies can be so successful with. And there are two main ways in which companies also benefit from a goals-driven approach. Firstly, tracking learner goals tells you whether your expectations as an organization have been met or whether they need to be adjusted. If you map learning goals to company outcomes, you're able to clearly define the expectations of your learning program, and also you can be sure that these are strategically relevant to the entire organization. The second main way in which companies benefit from goals or from a goals-driven approach to learning is that they have a way of measuring and understanding the effectiveness of a leadership development program at any time. If you're analyzing engagement, you can track whether your employees are making steady progress or whether you need to intervene and take a necessary measure in order to support them. So if you've been following closely, you will have learned that there are three main things or three main elements to a successful leadership development program. The first one is personalization. The second one is scalability. And the third one is that individual and organizational outcomes have to be measurable. So in order to make these two measurable, they have to be clearly defined in a framework that connects them both, that connects the individual goal to the organizational goal. Basically, what you need is a framework that acts as a common language between these outcomes, which are not always intrinsically related. And this is where focus areas enter the conversation. I would like to invite Huram to explain what focus areas are, as a framework that encompasses leadership development outcomes that we can offer to learners and to companies. And I would like Huram to do this because he was actually one of the driving forces behind focus areas at Sharpist in the first place. So I would like to share the stage or the screen with you, Huram, at this point.
Thank you, Juan. So for all members of the audience, right, I think I'd like to share, what is the problem that we were trying to solve, right? So that we can try and really get into the complexity of this, right? So we're talking about here one-on-one leadership coaching, right? So this one-on-one leadership coaching, as we all know, happens in a confidential environment where only the learner, who is an employee of a company who bought coaching, right, and the coach are engaging in a conversation about their development, right? Typically, the way this happens is, you match the coach with a learner and then you set them off and say, okay, go learn. And we hope that at the end of that 6 months, 1 year, whatever, you've learned something, right? Now, that's the problem that we want to flip, we want to solve, right? We want to be able to say from that one-on-one conversation or those multiple one-on-one conversations with various employees, what's coming out of there is a clear set of goals or outcomes that tangibly the company can take and move forward with, right? Now, how do you do that, right? One, we don't want to violate confidentiality, right? Two, we don't want to tell employees this is what you should learn, right? And three, we don't want coaches to come back and tell us what exactly the employees learned, right? So the way we've, I believe, sort of moved significantly in the direction of tracking this is to say, we're going to create a standardized framework of skills, right? And this is called focus areas of leadership development, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to ask companies to select what are the skills and focus areas that are most important to them, right? And in 2 minutes, Karola will share with you an example of a customer that did that, right? So what we have then is a company saying, okay, there are 32 focus areas, right? Of the 32 focus areas, we have selected 3, 5, 10, whatever that might be. Then what we do is we ask the learners to set their goals against one or more of these focus areas. So what that means is that learners can write their own goals in free-form text, but they link their goals to these focus areas. So what we've then done is we've created a common framework wherein company has selected their goals and learners are selecting their goals, right? Now, as these coaching sessions are happening, what we can do is we can say, okay, what was each of these coaching sessions about? What is the goals and how is the progress of each of these learners against these sessions? And then at an aggregate level, against these 32 focus areas, we can show reports to the company to say, look, we see progress against these goals. Okay, that was a lot, and we can come back to it in the Q&A, right? But I want to first sort of, introduce what are these focus areas, right? We said coaching ultimately is about developing leadership skills, right? We made that call, right? And we are able to put, I believe, 95% of all coaching sessions can fit within one of these 32 focus areas, right? And they fall into 4 categories. The first one is resilience, right? The second one is self-leadership. The third one is interpersonal leadership. And the fourth one is organizational leadership, right? We started with resilience because first and foremost, where coaching helps you is showing up at your best every single day, right? That is resilience. Right? It covers things like emotion and stress regulation. It covers things like, your purpose and values, your self-awareness, etc. That's the core, and we wanted to start there. Next, we went to self-leadership, right? On self-leadership, we said, okay, if you are resilient, if you're showing up at your best every day, how do you challenge yourself to set goals and achieve them for yourself, right? So that's self-leadership. Then we went to interpersonal leadership, right? How do you communicate with each other, with others? How do you, give and receive feedback? How do you manage conflicts and relationships, etc.? And then finally, we went to organizational leadership, which is leading transformation and change and, aspects of strategic planning and creativity and innovation for the organization, right? So through this, right, and we've tested this with thousands of coaching sessions now, not a single complaint from a coach saying, hey, I did a coaching session, I can't find where this fits into, right? So we've created a framework where every single coaching session, right, can fall under one of these focus areas. Then when you have every single goal that every learner sets linked to one of these focus areas, right, then what we can do is we can track in the back end progress against goals as reflected against a focus area. So I'll take an example. If there are 3 employees, 3 leaders working on empathy as a skill that they're trying to develop with their coaching session, and they have a goal related to empathy, right? And they say they've made progress against it or completed a goal, then we can see on an aggregate level, okay, there are 3 people who have worked on empathy and they've made this much progress in the last month, and we can report that to HR without violating confidentiality of the individual cases of what exactly they're learning or who is it that's learning empathy in that case, right? Karola, I'd love to bring you in here. Can you talk about sort of your experience with customers, right? How have you used this focus area map in the way customers engage with it?
Yes, thank you. So there are a lot of different ways that we can use this. I wanted to tell you about one example that I found particularly interesting because it really shows how you can work with these focus areas when planning your project. So we have one customer who is a global operating customer with thousands and hundreds of thousands of employees. And so, of course, they have a very good onboarding concept. So new leadership enters the company or is being promoted within. And then they have a 3-month onboarding program where everyone is brought up to speed. In a large organization, there's a lot of information about how this company works. that has to be transmitted in these 3 months. And so after these 3 months, the new leadership is supposed to be ready to start the job. And now the customer found out that yes, after the 3 months, the people had all of the relevant information they needed to do for their job, but they were lacking in a kind of individual supervision, and also it didn't really transmit the leadership values that they wanted their employees to really go on and to implement long-term with their teams. And so we were saying, yes, we can work on these missing links with our coaching. And we were looking, what are the main aspects that you consider important for your leadership development and for your leadership values that you want to transport. And we found 3 main topics that were most important to this company. And the one was self-reflection. The leader has to be able to really reflect on their doings and their decisions, and also role clarity. And the third one is building and maintaining relationships. And so once we had identified the 3 missing links for the leadership skills, so to say, we then went ahead and had a look, how can we map these to the focus areas? And there we could see that really it fits very well in these 4 pillars that we have here, because the first most important point for this customer was self-reflection. And there we identified the focus areas in the pillar of resilience that were the most important ones here. And we chose self-motivation, purpose and values, growth mindset, and also well-being as the items that we wanted to tackle in this for this most important point. For role clarity, we were seeing that yes, we have a lot of similarities in the self-leadership pillar. And then for the third, building and maintaining relationships, we had a lot of topics that were really fitting with the interpersonal leadership pillar. And so we went ahead and we really worked on providing customized micro tasks for each of these 3 main pillars, and then the focus areas that we identified with. And for each month of the onboarding of the new leader, we would then have these customized micro tasks, 1 month for each pillar of the leadership skill that we wanted to transmit. And that made it also very easy to then have a look, how did it work out? How did the coaches work with these subjects? Because you can then see afterwards in the analysis what has been worked on in these respective months. And you could really see the impact that it had with the customized micro tasks.
Thank you, Karola. I'd like to point out the big difference between what would have happened if we did not have an approach of focus area oriented goal setting, right? What would the client have done? They would have come to us and said, hey, we want to buy one-on-one coaching, right? Okay, how many leaders do you have? 50, fine. 50 leaders, they're going through onboarding, one-on-one coaching. Here's your coach, bye, right? Think about the difference between that conversation and the amount of insights and deliberate ability to focus coaching between that conversation and a conversation where we sit down with HR and we say, okay, what do you want one-on-one coaching to these 50 leaders for? So, well, onboarding. Well, what are these skills, right? And it's like, well, self-reflection, role clarity, building relationships. Okay, now how can we help you make this concrete through the coaching journey? So there are micro tasks that we can customize. We can film a video with HR that we can share with coaches, right? So coaches can then get deliberate about knowing what is the purpose of this coaching program. We do live onboarding with learners where HR talks to them and say, hey, we are getting coaching because we would like you to effectively onboard with these 3 skills are important. Then we can have tracking, right? If you go to the next slide, and the next one. Yeah. So what we can do is we can then say, okay, you have goals set, right? How are you progressing against these goals, and which category of focus areas do these goals fall under, right? So as the learners, these 50 learners are going through onboarding and they are progressing against goals, against any one of these self-reflection, role clarity, or building relationships, we then get data which can feed back to HR customer and say, hey, here is the amount of progress that people are making against these skills. Yes, they're working on other skills, and look at all of these wonderful other skills that they're working on that are not part of onboarding, because one-on-one coaching is an individual approach. But here's how we're progressing against the onboarding goals, right? So we make it very much sort of, we take away this, this blank screen as it comes to coaching and say, okay, we don't know what's going on, but we are effectively sort of in a confidential way able to bring insights back and say, okay, here's the effectiveness and here's how you are progressing against your goals as a company, right, through coaching.
I think, Huram, that's actually a wonderful segue or a wonderful way of bringing up one of the most powerful features, I would say, of our learner experience, and that is progress tracking. As you've just shown, we have in the screen sort of three screens, again, from the Sharpist app, where you can see the whole process of checking into a goal or checking in with your goals as a learner, right? We mentioned before that setting, tracking, and achieving goals encourages learners to reflect and also provide motivation for them. Setting, tracking, and achieving this process or this habit. What is your take on the learner implications of being able to track your progress on a regular basis?
Yeah, absolutely. I think too often what we find is that coaching just ends up becoming a benefit. Right? Everybody likes to get a coach, right? If HR buys coaching for a leader, they're happy because, well, you've now got this person you can talk to about, whatever is it that, is top of mind at any given time, right? So typically what then would happen is you would have your coaching session, you get in front of your coach, who's a very good listener typically and very good at asking questions, but then your focus of the conversation typically ends up being, what is your top of mind issue that you want to address in this week, right? Which is great. And I think we need to have room for coaching to do that. However, I think you're selling coaching short if you only do that, right? What coaching has the ability to do is help you develop skills, transform your mindset, develop yourself as a better human being over a period of time. And many of these transformations will not happen in one session, right? They will need a good 6 months to a year, right? So how do you string together multiple coaching sessions to build on one goal, right? On one objective of towards that transformation, right? And the way I think you do that is by starting a journey, by deliberately setting a goal, right? And before every session, when you get into our video call, right? The first question that is asked before you see your coach is, which one of your goals, and we list the goals there, which one of your goals do you want to work on in the session, right? And then you select that, you get into the coaching session, the coach then sees what you selected, right, before you got on the video call. And so then the conversation can be about that goal. And then at the end of the session, you have the opportunity, what you see here, right, is the ability to share, okay, how have I progressed against the goal, right? And so you can look here, right? On which step, so the middle panel here, on which step do you feel you are at for this goal, right? And we have a 4-step sort of scale. First is, I have set my goal. Second is, I know the actions I have to take to achieve my goal. Third is, I am practicing what I learned through my coaching. And then finally, I've achieved the goal already, right? So you're able to then say at the end of every session, how are you progressing against the goal? Now, when that happens, before you enter your next session, you're already conscious of, okay, I need to work on this goal, right? When you enter your next session, at least by then you're reminded that there is a longer term goal beyond whatever's top of mind right now that you want to talk about with your coach, right? And so what we're trying to do is stitch together coaching journeys. And I think your first slide, Juan, was about how learning is a journey, right? Exactly. It's not a one-time event, right? It's not about getting in there, being excited and inspired by your coach and boom, you're out. No, there's a lot of work to be done in between sessions, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of work to be done through multiple sessions towards a single goal, which sometimes, I go through 3 to 6 months just focusing on one goal, right? Because sometimes that's how long it takes.
That's true. I'm sorry to interrupt now the conversation, Huram, but I think a very interesting question came into the chat. This is from Andreas. Andreas says, Checking, tracking, and achieving goals are important coaching tasks. What about modifying goals? How is this reflected in the learner's journey?
Absolutely. In fact, I think, 95%, I mean, I'm making up a number, but a very large majority of the first goals that you set will probably be wrong, right? We know with learners, but I know also from my own personal experience, right? When I start a new coaching journey, I will, think about, this is a goal I need to set, right? I need to, I'll take a simple example, right? I need to get better at public speaking, right? I said, I was like, okay, I want to learn the skills of how do I project my voice? How do I use my hand motion? How do I engage the audience? I get into my coaching sessions, and a good coach will ask the questions that may help me realize, actually, my issue with public speaking is not any of these skills. Maybe some part of it is any of these skills, but there is a degree of insecurity that I have that I'm bringing every time I come into a public speaking setting that is rooted somewhere else, right? And maybe what I need to work on through the next 3 to 6 months, my coaching journey, is that insecurity. Where is that feeling of being judged by other people coming from, right? And what is it that I can do about that? Because that may be the reason. So to the point of Andreas, I think modifying goals is super important. And in fact, when you come here and you can see the first panel, right? And you say, start check-in, the first thing that you will have the option to do before you even get onto this panel is the ability to change your goal, right? And you can just dump it. As soon as you do one session, you come back and say, wrong goal, modify it completely. And then you can even go back, by the way, right? You can say, I'm practicing my goal because I actually know, I just realized that I still have more work to do, and go back in the process. So it's very, very flexible.
Yeah, it's super flexible, and it's also, I guess, speaks to the point where you mentioned that it's also an iterative process. I can also share from my first experience with coaching, the first 3 goals that I set for myself, I was able to achieve within a span of 1 month. So that told me that those were quite short-term goals, but that doesn't mean that things can't change, because I kept adding goals as I went about or modified. And that's also the beauty of having an app that allows you to do so without disrupting the coaching process or the app experience. So, okay, no, we don't have any more questions. This is just a comment. But yeah, so now that we've covered this learner-facing feature or learner-facing advantage of using focus areas as the driver of a coaching journey, I think we could use the time that we have left to talk about the organizational implications of focus areas. Basically, the key advantage that focus areas have the power to unlock insights that are relevant not only to the learner, not only to the individual, but insights that are relevant to the entire organization. So I would like to hear from both of you, how can organizations make the best use out of these insights? What are the cases? What are the ways of using this and leveraging these for better results?
Yeah, maybe I can give a very good example that I have with one of my customers. We have a very successful, fast-growing company called Lingoda as one of our customers. And they are really, yes, hiring a lot, growing a lot. There are a lot first-time leaders in their ranks, and this in the past led to a lot of unpleasant results, like there were unproductive teams, there was dissatisfaction among teams and also among leaderships. And also it was a high workload for HR because, of course, a lot of employees and leadership were approaching HR for consulting. And so what we did there was a different approach from what I described just earlier. This was an approach where we were transmitting the focus areas and the most important points to the coaches. And so in this way, we would do very detailed information to the coaches saying, please be aware that we have here dysfunctions in teams. We need to concentrate on leadership approach and also on team building. And with this knowledge, the coaches went into the coaching, and then basically we didn't set the the subjects they wanted to talk about by introducing micro tasks. But here we were seeing how are the coaches translating these informations of the coaches into their focus areas and into what they are talking about. And so at the end of the coaching, we could really see with the selected focus areas, what were the real issues that the leadership personnel were working on. What was their problem, for example, with dysfunction in teams? How did they solve it? And of course, apart from looking at the analysis that we were able to make with the focus areas, the customer was then able to translate it into their leadership program and see, okay, this is really what we need to work on in the future, because this seems to be a very important point for our current leadership.
Yeah, really good sort of, counter example to sort of saying, here are the skills that we want you to develop, as with the case of the onboarding example of the previous client, right? This one is where you're going into saying, we are going to keep an open end on what these coaching sessions are about. And the coaches at the end of every coaching session, right, have to select from a drop down, which focus area was this coaching session about, right? And all of that data that is aggregated from all of the leaders who are going through coaching, what you're able to get is, okay, what are the big topics that people are talking about in the coaching session? Without identifying any individual at an aggregate level, you're able to then share with HR and see, okay, this is the most important topic, right? Emotion, stress regulation, maybe communication is an issue, right? And so you're able to identify what are the top topics. And with this particular client with Lingoda, what we also did is we looked at this data about 6 months back or so. And then we said, of the top areas of focus, can we do a group coaching session, right? So we got together multiple leaders together, right? And we said, okay, you are all talking about this in your coaching session. Let's do a deep dive together as a group, right? Which was led by 5 of our coaches over 5 sessions. We were able to do topics that everybody wanted to talk about that we learned through the focus areas coming up.
Yes, and the beauty with it was, I think, it was that HR was really able to see actual changes at the end of the coaching journey. So they have like the year-end reviews, which was usually a huge stress factor for the leadership. There was a lot of questions around it and it took a long time. And so we could see that after the 6 months of coaching, the following year-end reviews really went a lot smoother. It was a lot more satisfaction among the leadership, but also among the teams who were in these reviews, and HR could see a significant lower workload for them involved in all of this.
Which I'm sure they were very, very happy about.
Of course.
We have a question from Raymond that I think is really, really relevant to this conversation. Raymond asks, do you offer 360 or peer scoring on the key objectives as well?
Yes, we do, Raymond. And this is an offer to all of our clients. Interestingly, very few clients take us up on it, right? We all know how complex these 360 surveys are, right? And I think clients typically are hesitant to undergo a full 360, especially if it's off cycle, right? If it's not part of their core 360 project that's going on for the entire company, right? We have very few, and I think, I could count on my hand how many have actually taken us up on that 360, but you're absolutely right. All of our surveys, we do offer a self-reflection survey as well, and that clients take us up far more often. And we usually design the self-reflection survey on these focus areas, right? Where we find the clients engaging much more is where, we have not done a survey, but at the end of the coaching session, we have data around what the coaching session was about. So the clients love to look at that data to see, okay, how are we sort of actually doing against this? And at the end of the session, we also have like self-reporting on, okay, how do you see yourself progressing against each of these skills, which are based on focus areas.
I think that's super interesting what you just mentioned, Huram. slightly going into the direction of how to measure impact in terms of both coaching impact or leadership development impact in terms of organizations. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of, I wouldn't say controversy, but yes, a lot of discussion around how do you best measure the impact that coaching has. ROI has been touted as a terrible way of doing it, and I have to say that I agree, and I think most of us do, because the true advantages and the true impact of coaching is not necessarily measured in a financial sense. How would these different types of self-assessments, 360 surveys and whatnot, help us or help anybody who wants to measure the impact of coaching?
Yeah, no, this is a very important topic, right? And I have a strong view on this. First and foremost, let's acknowledge, right? The industry does a terrible job, right, of tracking anything when it comes to, very soft activity like coaching. I mean, mostly for good reasons, because it's really, really hard, right? But I do believe there needs to be some accountability, right? You can't go to large companies, month over month, quarter over quarter, year over year, and say, hey, spend hundreds of thousands of euros on coaching, and say, well, you just got to trust that it's going to work. Here's a research paper which shows coaching is tied to impact, right? If I was the leader, I would probably keep signing it because I know the impact of coaching and I trust it. But I think rightfully so, there are leaders, CEOs and CHROs who are asking the question, what is the impact, right? Now, what is the baseline in the industry? The baseline in the industry is like almost no reporting, to the point where there is no reporting around, I bought X 100 hours of coaching, how many of them were used, right? There's no reporting, not just with traditional in-person coaching, but also with digital coaching players. I rarely see this as a measure which is reported. Come on, we know this number, right? We track in digital coaching how many coaching hours were bought, how many coaching hours were used. At a bare minimum, there has to be a reporting around utilization. And I think utilization is an interesting number, not just because how much was used for what you paid, but also as an indicator to show are learners going back again and again, right? Proactively and schedule, because these are busy people. If busy people, leaders are going back again and again, scheduling time with their coaches to do their coaching and completing their micro task and follow up and all of that, that tells you something. So I think utilization is a very important metric, number one, right? Number two, I want to come back to this entire conversation around goals and focus areas, right? I think we have to report how do you see progress against focus areas, skills, right? Not just saying, okay, we did 20 sessions, it's great, we believe that there's an impact. I think there has to be a conversation around what are the kinds of skills are you seeing, right? And what are that, which is why for me, this framework of saying, what are the skills? What were these coaching sessions about? Next, it's about showing progress, right? Which is where this goals progress tracking comes in, right? So it's not just saying how many sessions were done for which focus areas, but what is the individual self-reporting on how am I progressing? And I think that's very powerful. And what you can also do for self-reporting is you can do a full big survey at the start of the program, middle of the program, end of the program, right? I think till there, is an absolute must, which is to recap utilization, right? Topics discussed and self-reporting of progress. I think everybody can do that. And when you start to show these reports to HR, believe you me, they are very, very satisfied about how much they feel the impact has been done of this program. The problem is we don't even do that. And when we don't do that, the conversation goes straight down to ROI, right? It's like, okay, now show me I put 100,000 here, how much did I get back? Actually, nobody really wants to know that. People want some level of accountability to say, okay, I spent 100,000. First of all, do people proactively show up and use it? Do they want it, right? Secondly, what are the topics that they talk about? Thirdly, are they themselves showing that they are saying that they are progressive, right? After that, of course, you can do 180, 360 surveys. You can also link sort of, performance management reviews and see whether people are actually progressing against OKRs and all of that. But that's a whole lot more complex. And I think it starts to get costly at that time.
That was a very thorough explanation of ways of measuring and the impact areas, let's say, of a successful learning program. Specifically now, talking about focus areas. On the right-hand side of the screen, we're seeing a screenshot or a snapshot of the dashboard that we offer to customers. And this is the part of the dashboard that is entirely dedicated to focus areas. And we see top 5 focus areas for this imaginary client in comparison to other Sharpist learners in the month, and also the trends, right? How focus areas develop. Why is this important for HR? Like, how can they best make use of this information?
Yeah, so I think, Karola gave a great example at the start around, a client who was very particular. I want these 3 big focus areas, right? I want to see progress against that because that is what my onboarding program was about, right? Now, once you do that, and then you go through a whole process, right? Which includes, an onboarding, live onboarding, where learners get to hear from the HR that those 3 are important. Coaches get briefed that those 3 are important. They get micro tasks which show, content towards those 3 topics. Now, all of that's happening, right? But then how do you know as HR whether there's actually sort of a focus on that in the program? And how do you know whether people are actually making progress against that, right? Which is where this reporting comes, right? So this is our HR dashboard, which shows you for particular focus areas versus others, what is the share of focus of coaching conversations, right? So that's the first level of reporting, right? And what we're also able to do here is show this prominence of that focus areas versus the average of all Sharpist customers, right? So we have data of like, thousands of learners who are going through focus areas at other companies, right? And we are able to show you, it's like, okay, look, you said, building relationships is an important focus area. Let's show you how much that is in focus in your company, in your learners versus the entire population of learners of the entire Sharpist, right? So what you're able to see is month on month, week on week, quarter by quarter, how are the focus areas moving, right? I'll give you a very good example of African Leadership University, which is one of our clients, also a company that I co-founded. But all of their 60 leaders and managers went through Sharpist coaching, right? Or going through Sharpist coaching, right? And in our reporting, what we saw suddenly on 1 month versus the next, emotion and stress regulation shot up through the roof, right? It turns out that was the month where they were going through a massive change program, right? And they needed significantly more help with change management and managing emotions than they were getting, right? That report we shared with the CEO, right? And what they then did as a reaction to that is they called for a company-wide sort of, coach-led facilitated discussion around how to manage transformation and change. And they used I don't know if you know the 5 steps of grief framework, et cetera, right? But the reason they were able to identify that as an intervention is because they saw that emotion and stress regulation became a very important topic at ALU for that given month, and they were able to intervene. So it's very valuable data, right? Now, what's not yet on the dashboard, what's coming in the coming months, is a report on how you're actually progressing on those goals, right? So are people completing goals? Are people on a 3 out of 5 on progress against goals on particular focus areas? We're able to show that very soon because it's already being tracked by learners.
That is actually very powerful indeed. And I would like to apologize to everybody who's still on the line because we're actually almost 10 minutes over time. So for whoever would like to stay on the call for the next 5 minutes, we can take questions, we can take any sort of comment, and we'll form a little discussion around it. But also, we're very aware that the webinar was scheduled until 45. The discussion was so good that in the end that flew by a little bit. But yes, please stay on the line if you would like to ask any questions, and also feel free to drop off if you have a very important call.
Yeah, and please do not hesitate to book a one-on-one session with us, right? And we're very happy to talk to you about Sharpist or focus areas, and as it relates to you and your company.
We have an interesting question from Andreas. Again, Andreas, very highly engaged audience member. Thank you. Andreas says, I think about a 5th focus area. What do you think about a focus area like transfer the patterns of thinking, feeling, and acting to daily work?
Yeah, for me,
No, go ahead.
Sorry, one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, for me, this one, if we're not, I mean, it is almost like a fundamental base layer, right, across all the focus areas. If these if whatever thinking, feeling, acting, and changes that you're experiencing across any of these focus areas are not able to translate to daily work, it's not useful, right? So which is why if you saw on our tracking, right, if you go up the slides one, you can look at it there, right? If you look at the level 3 already, right, I am practicing what I have learned from coaching, right? And that implies that for any focus area, you're not done. You can't check off the goal till you go through that step of you're actually practicing and applying it to your daily work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I think this is a nice suggestion, Andreas. But I think that transferring the patterns of thinking, feeling, and acting to daily work are kind of the conditions upon which you can tell whether you've achieved your goal or not. You know, the first step is obviously being aware of the type of knowledge that you want to acquire, that you need, but then it all comes down to whether or not you're actually able to implement it in your daily life, in your career, and your work life. So I wouldn't necessarily see this as a focus area, but rather as the approach to knowing and achieving, to knowing whether or not you've achieved your goals. Thank you. Rosa has a nice comment. I look forward to the new dashboard. It will be a really useful tool for tracking progress. Indeed.
Absolutely. So there's actually the first release of the dashboard, I believe, today, and there's a second release that's in about a week or so. Important to note that the way we do development at Sharpist is that we follow an agile approach. So what you're going to see is that incremental progress on launching different features of the dashboard, right? So we prioritized what are the most important features based on what we've heard from customers. We put that first, and then second and third. Over the next 3 months, you'll see the entire dashboard released in 2-week increments.
Thank you. Raymond has another question. What are the main L&D topics for 2022-2023? What do your clients report? This is a nice one.
I mean, I don't have the concrete answer on this, but maybe Karola, you want to start? What are you seeing? And then I can share what I'm seeing.
Well, we see some trends that have been shifting a lot now over the springtime due to the political situation changing. So what we see right now is a lot higher demand to ask for kind of mental health advice, how to also make sure that your team is healthy and that everyone knows how to take care of themselves. So there we see a lot higher interest, and we see a lot more questions around stress regulation. So I think that a lot of companies are going through a very intense period right now, and we're always very happy when we can support this with our coaching program.
Yeah. And along similar lines, what I'm seeing is change management. Every company is changing and transforming, it seems, at every level. And skills-related change management for leaders, which includes, number one, your ability to communicate the change. Number two, your ability to buy into the change yourself. Your ability to emotionally connect with teams and translate the message through your relationships. So these skills are very, very much can be developed with coaching and are very important for change management and transformations. And that's what we're seeing as a huge L&D topic.
Right. We have 2 more questions. Florentine's question is about how coaches are selected and matched to learners. If you would like, Florentine, we would be very happy to have an individual conversation with you to explain our coach matching process, which involves an algorithm and also involves the human touch, which is essential. I would like to take Carolyn's question because it's really relevant to this topic. And that is the following. If I define learning as a lifelong process for individuals and organizations, I get doubts that goal tracking and changes in organizations can be tracked by a scale that easy. For me, it seems a much more complex process. What do you think? Absolutely.
I completely agree, Caroline. This process of goals tracking, it's not a linear process at all, right? Ideally, it would be, hey, company sets the goals, right? All learners agree to those goals. all coaches work with learners towards exactly those same goals over the next 6 months. And then we report, okay, we move from level 3 to level 5 based on a 360, right? That's not how it works at all, right? The way it works is it's a very fuzzy process where customers select certain goals, learners will select some goals that overlap with it, and learners will change their goals every 2 weeks. Some of them will be achieved in a week, some of them in 3 months, some of them in 6 months, right? So very complex process. What we are observing is that if you are able to have a fundamental grounding framework, like the focus area framework that we have, that and then allow for this flexibility and modification to happen in the system, what you start to see is this picture across multiple learners over multiple weeks and months that starts to make sense, right? Even though goals are changing a lot of the time, not all of them are linearly tracked, etc. You're able to see a picture which tells you, and we can see this every month with our customers, hey, change management is important. Hey, communication is important. Hey, emotion self-regulation is becoming more important. We are seeing learners more engaged on this topic. We're seeing progress in this topic, right? And we're seeing, as we saw with Lingoda at the end of the year, we've actually seen those 3 topics improve a lot, which you care about, right? So yes, it's very complex, but it's beautiful if you let go of full control as a linear process, embrace the complexity and the flexibility, but then track it against a framework. You start to see a picture emerge.
That is a great answer and a great way, I think, of wrapping up this webinar. Thank you so much, Huram. Thank you so much, Karola, for the really lively discussion, for the customer examples, for the thought leadership on focus areas. And thank you, everybody, for participating and for attending the webinar. If you would like to know more information, I know that Florentine, for example, had a specific question about coach matching. Book an individual call now. We shared the link in the chat. Shoshana, if you could share it again, that would be fantastic. And yes, with that said, thank you again, everybody.